Let's break it down step by step. 1. Indian National Congress, INC, is not the work of one person. The INC, a very important political group in India, was not created by one person alone. Some people think it was started only by a man named A.O. Hume, but this is not completely true. Before INC was formed, many small political groups were already working in different parts of India. People were already thinking about India's future, and these ideas made it possible for the INC to be created. Number 2. The year 1885 was important. 1885 is important because it was the year when the Indian National Congress, INC, was officially started. This year shows when all the efforts to bring people together started to show in a bigger way. 3. The Indian Association and Surendranath Banerjee. One group, called the Indian Association of Calcutta, did a lot of work to bring people together. A leader of this group was Surendranath Banerjee, a well-known figure who wanted Indians to have a voice. He helped to organize something called the Indian National Conference. 4. Indian National Conference. In December 1883, the first Indian National Conference was held. Leaders from all the big towns in India were invited. The aim was to bring people together from different parts of India and talk about the future of the country. Example. Imagine you have many groups of friends in different cities. Now, you want all of them to meet in one big place to talk about how you can all work together to solve problems. That's what the Indian National Conference did for Indian leaders. 5. Ananda Mohan Bose's vision. Ananda Mohan Bose was the president of the first conference. He hoped that one day, this meeting would be the first step in creating a national parliament. A parliament is where leaders of a country come together to make important decisions for everyone. Number 6. The Second Indian National Conference. The second meeting of this Indian National Conference was held in December 1885, again in Calcutta. But soon after, a new group called the Indian National Congress, INC, became more popular and more important. 7. Why the Indian National Congress, INC, was important. The INC quickly became the most popular political group in India. It represented more people from different parts of India. It took over from the Indian National Conference, became the main voice for Indian people who wanted freedom from British rule. In short, before the Indian National Congress, INC, was formed, many small groups were already working towards Indian unity. The Indian Association and its leader, Surendranath Banerjee, organized a national conference where people discussed India's future. After a few meetings, the NC became the most popular and powerful group to lead the country towards freedom. Does this make sense? Let's break this down in the simplest way, step by step. 1. Who was Mr. Hume? Mr. Hume was a man who worked for the government of India and later retired. He played a big role in shaping the Indian National Congress, INC, which was a political group for all of India. He made the idea of having this big group real and practical. 2. What did W.C. Banerjee believe? W.C. Banerjee, an important leader in India, believed that the idea of the Indian National Congress came from Lord Dufferin. Lord Dufferin was the British official in charge of India, called the Viceroy. According to Banerjee, Dufferin gave the idea to Mr. Hume, and Hume started working to form the INC. The purpose of this group, according to Dufferin, was to understand what Indian people wanted and avoid any big political problems. Number 3. What was Lord Dufferin's idea? Lord Dufferin wanted to create a political group, the INC, where Indian people could share their wishes and concerns. This way, the British government could understand the Indian people's needs and prevent any big political unrest, protests, or revolts. By giving Indian people a place to talk about their problems, Dufferin thought it would keep India peaceful under British control. Example. Think of a school where students are unhappy about the rules. The principal creates a student council where students can share their problems. This way, students feel heard and no one causes big trouble. That's what Dufferin wanted the INC to be, a way for Indians to express their issues peacefully. 4. What did Lala Lajpat Rai think? Lala Lajpat Rai, a famous Indian leader, had a different opinion. He believed that the INC was created to act as a safety valve. for the growing anger and unrest among the Indian people. A safety valve is something that allows pressure to be released slowly to prevent an explosion. He thought that the British didn't start the INC to help India, but to protect their own rule. Example: imagine a balloon filling with too much air. If you don't let some air out, the balloon will burst. Lala Lajpat Rai believed the INC was a way to let out just enough pressure so India wouldn't burst, with anger against the British. 5. Strengthening British rule. According to Lala Lajpat Rai, the main goal of creating the INC was to strengthen British rule, not to help Indians get real political power. He thought the British used the INC to keep control over India. Any political changes or help for Indian people that came through the INC was, in his view, just a side effect, not the main reason the INC was created. 6. The British Empire's perspective. For the British, the idea of the INC was mainly to keep India calm and prevent any rebellions. Lala Lajpat Rai believed that any progress India made through the INC was not the main goal, but a minor outcome. In short, Mr. Hume helped start the Indian National Congress, INC, but Lord Dufferin might have given him the idea. Lord Dufferin to be a way for the British government to understand Indian people's concerns and avoid any big problems. Lala Lajpat Rai thought the INC was just a way to control the growing anger in India and keep British power strong. The INC, in his opinion, was more about helping the British rule and not about really helping Indians get political power. Does this help explain things better? Let's go through this step by step in the simplest way possible. Mr. Hume was serious about starting the Indian National Congress, INC. Mr. Hume was very serious about creating a political group that would help India. Even though people talk about the British motives behind it, Mr. Hume truly believed that India needed a political organization to bring people together. 2. Mr. Hume's letter to the graduates. Mr. Hume wrote a letter to the students who graduated from Calcutta University. In his letter, he said something important. Individuals working alone are not powerful enough to make a big change. He said that India needed unity, organization, and a clear plan. To do this, people needed to come together in an association, a group, to work as a team. Example: imagine if you and your friends want to change something in school, like the lunch menu. If one person tries to talk to the principal alone, it may not work. But if all of you come together as a group, it becomes easier to be heard. That's what Hume was telling the graduates. Work together, not alone. 3. Hume asked for volunteers. Mr. Hume asked for 50 volunteers to join him in starting a movement. His goal was to improve India mentally, morally, socially, and politically. This means he wanted India to get better in every possible way: how people thought, behaved, interacted, and worked with the government. 4. Hume had support from government officials. Mr. Hume wasn't working alone. He had the support of important people in both India and England. Many government officials liked his idea of starting the Indian National Congress, INC. Example: if you're organizing a school event, it's much easier when you have the support of the teachers and the principal. Similarly, Hume had support from people in power. 5. The Indian National Congress was born from both India and England. The Indian National Congress, INC, wasn't just an Indian idea. It was a product of both India and England. It showed that people from both sides, the rulers and the ruled, were involved in creating it. 6. Recent research about Mr. Hume. New studies have shown that Alan Hume was an enlightened imperialist. This means that even though he worked for the British, he was smart enough to see problems between the British rulers and the Indian people. Hume saw that the gap between the British rulers and the Indian people was growing, and this worried him. Example: imagine if there's a growing misunderstanding between teachers and students at school. Hume felt that there was a similar problem between the British and the Indian people, and it worried him. Now 7. Indian National Conference and S.N. Banerjee. In 1883, S.N. Banerjee, a leader, started a political group called the Indian National Conference. Hume was uncomfortable with this group because S.N. Banerjee had strong political views that the British didn't like. Banerjee was inspired by Italian nationalists like Mazzini and Garibaldi, who had fought for freedom in their own country. Hume decided to avoid this group, and start his own political group. Example: if someone in school starts a group that's too bold or strong, the principal might worry that it could cause trouble. Hume felt the same about S.N. Banerjee's group, so he wanted to create a safer group. 8. Hume's plan for a loyal and innocent political group. Hume didn't want a group that would cause trouble for the British. He wanted a political group that was loyal, supportive of the British, and innocuous, not harmful or dangerous. His idea was to keep the INC focused on being loyal to the British, at least in the beginning. Pattern 9. The First Indian National Congress meeting. The First Indian National Congress, INC, meeting took place in 1885 in Bombay, now Mumbai. Shri Umesh Chandra Banerjee was the president of this meeting. This meeting marked the official start of the INC, which would go on to play a huge role in India's freedom movement. In short, Mr. Hume was serious about forming the Indian National Congress, INC, and believed India needed a political group to work together. He asked people to join him to help improve India in many ways. Hume had support from both India and England in starting the INC. Hume was worried about the growing gap between the British and Indian people, and he wanted to create a loyal political group that would keep things calm. The first INC meeting was held in 1885 in Bombay with W.C. Banerjee as the president. Does this explanation help make things clearer? Let's break this down step by step in the simplest way. Number 1. What is the first phase of the Indian National Congress, 1885 to 1905? The first phase of the Indian National Congress, INC, from 1885 to 1905 was called the period of moderate politics. People also called it Tea Party politics, or political mendicancy, which means begging for change instead of demanding it strongly. Example: imagine you're politely asking your teacher for a change in the school rules instead of strongly demanding it. This is what the Congress leaders did. They asked the British politely for reforms and changes. 2. Who were the moderate leaders? The leaders during this time were called moderates. These leaders were people like Dadabhai Naoroji, P.M. Mehta, D.E. Wacha, W.C. Banerjee, S.N. These leaders believed in liberalism, freedom and equality for all, and moderation, calm and gradual change. Example: if you want to make a change, you could either be very aggressive or calm and patient. The moderates chose the calm, patient way to make changes in India. 3. What did the moderates believe in? The moderates wanted freedom from racial and religious prejudice, treating all people equally, no matter their race or religion. Equality between all people. Everyone should be treated the same. Equality before the law. The law should be fair to everyone. Civil liberties, basic freedoms like freedom of speech. More representative institutions. People should have more of a say in government. Example: the moderates were like students asking for everyone in the school to be treated equally and have a say in making school rules. They wanted fairness and justice. 4. How to work. The moderates believed in gradual change, slow and steady improvements. Constitutionalism, following the law to bring about change. They didn't believe in trying to achieve impossible goals. They wanted to work on things that could be realistically done. M.G. Renaud, one of the moderates, said that they aimed for fairness and didn't push for ideas that were too far-fetched. Example: instead of asking for something unrealistic like no homework ever, the moderates might ask for smaller, realistic changes, like more study breaks. 5. Who dominated the Congress during this time? The Congress was mostly led by the middle-class intelligentsia. This means educated people who were lawyers, doctors, engineers, writers, journalists. These people were well-educated and came from cities, but they didn't really represent the common people or the masses. Many of them liked titles and jobs under the British government, which separated them from the common people. Example. Think of a student council made up of only the best students who rarely talk to other students. They might make decisions, but they don't really understand the problems of the average student. The Congress leaders were a bit like that. They were educated, but didn't really connect with ordinary people. Number 6. What did Sir Ferozeshah Mehta say? Sir Ferozeshah Mehta, a Congress leader, explained that the Congress wasn't really the voice of the common people, the masses. He said it was the duty of the educated people to speak up for the common people's problems and suggest solutions to the British. Example. Imagine if the student council doesn't ask regular students what they want, but decides to speak for them anyway. Mehta said it was still the council's job to help, even if they didn't directly hear from the students. Number 7. Summary of the moderates. The moderates were a group of calm and patient leaders who believed in working with the British to bring about slow changes. They focused on equality, fairness, and following the law. Most of them came from the middle class and didn't have much connection with the common people. They wanted to speak for the common people, but didn't have direct contact with them. Additional information. Moderates versus extremists. Later, a new group called the extremists, like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, and Lala Lajpat Rai, would emerge in the 20th century. They believed in stronger action and quicker changes. They felt the moderates were too slow and too friendly with the British. Example. If the moderates were like students politely asking for changes, the extremists were like students who demanded change immediately and were ready to protest. Does this help you understand the first phase of the Indian National Congress? Sure. Here's the text exactly as you requested, without any changes. 1. Why was the Indian National Congress, INC, formed? A.O. Hume, a British official, started the Indian National Congress, INC, after talking to Lord Dufferin, who was the Viceroy of India, the British leader in India. They thought it would be good to have an organization where Indians could express their concerns and needs to the British government. The Congress was not meant to fight the British at this time, but to work with them. Example. Imagine if your school principal talks to a teacher about starting a student group. This group would give students a chance to share their thoughts about how to improve the school. 2. Why did the early Congress leaders admire the British? The early Congress leaders, called the moderates, really liked British history and culture. They thought the British brought good things to India, like law, order, and education. They believed that British rule was good for India and would help India improve over time. They didn't see the British as enemies, but as friends, who would teach them how to govern themselves one day. Example. If you admire your teacher and think they are making you smarter, you would not see them as someone holding you back. You'd believe they are there to help you grow. 3. What did the Congress say about British rule? In 1886, Dadabhai Naoroji, a respected leader, spoke at the Congress meeting and said that British rule was a blessing for India. People in the audience were very happy to hear this. A.O. Hume, the Congress founder, even asked everyone to cheer for the British Queen and wished her a long life. Example. Imagine someone giving a speech in class about how amazing the teacher is and how thankful the students are for everything the teacher has done. Everyone claps and cheers. 4. What did Ananda Mohan Bose say in 1898? In 1898, Ananda Mohan Bose, who was the Congress president, said that educated Indians were friends of the British, not their enemies. He believed that if educated Indians and the British worked together, India would become a better place. Example. If someone says, "We, the smart students, aren't against the teacher. We want to work with the teacher to make our school better." 5. What did the moderates think was India's main problem? The moderates thought that India's biggest problem was social and economic backwardness. This means that many people in India were poor, uneducated, and living in old ways. They believed that the British rule wasn't the main problem. They thought that Indians needed to improve their own society and economy first. They didn't like how some British officials, called the Anglo-Indian bureaucracy, behaved, but they didn't blame British rule as a whole. Example, it's like saying, the problem in our school isn't the teacher. The problem is that the students don't know how to study well or work together. If we fix that, we can improve. 6. Why did the moderates believe British rule was necessary? The moderates believed that British rule was important to keep peace and order in India. They were worried that if the British left, chaos, confusion, and disorder would return to India. They remembered times in India's past when there was a lot of fighting between different groups. Gopal Krishna Gokal, a well-known moderate leader, said that even though some British officials were rude, the British government kept India stable. Without that stability, India wouldn't be able to grow and improve. The moderates felt that India wasn't ready to rule itself yet and needed British guidance for a while longer. Example, imagine if you believe your teacher is strict sometimes, but they keep the class from falling into chaos. Without the teacher, everyone might start fighting and nothing would get done. 7. The moderates, loyalty to the British Empire. The moderates were very loyal to the British Crown, the British government, and the Queen. They thought British rule had brought peace and order to India, which was important for progress. They believed India could only improve if it stayed under British rule for a longer time. Badruddin Tyabji, the third Congress president, said that the educated Indians were the most loyal friends of the British Empire. He believed that the educated Indians would help the British in making India better. The moderates didn't want to weaken the British Empire. They thought that staying under British rule was the best way forward for India. Example, if you believe that your teacher has helped the class become better and more organized, you might feel that the class would fall apart without the teacher. So, you stay loyal to the teacher because you think they are doing what's best for everyone. Extra information. The moderates were called moderates because they didn't want to fight the British or demand immediate independence. Instead, they wanted to work gradually with the British to bring slow changes. They used constitutional methods like petitions, speeches, and meetings to ask the British government for more rights for Indians. They believed in using peaceful ways to ask for change. Over time, some people became unhappy with the moderates because they felt that the moderates were too slow and too friendly with the British. These people later became known as the extremists because they wanted faster and more radical changes. To sum it all up, the Indian National Congress was started with the help of the British, and the early Congress leaders, the moderates, liked British rule. The moderates thought British rule was good for India because it kept peace and order. They wanted to work with the British to improve India and didn't believe that fighting them would help. The moderates stayed loyal to the British Crown because they thought British rule was necessary for India's progress. Okay, I will explain it in the simplest way, step by step, like I'm teaching a young child. Here's what the passage is talking about. 1. Belief in British justice. What the Congress leaders thought. Many leaders of the Indian National Congress believed that the British people were fair, kind, and believed in freedom. Example, imagine you think your teacher is always fair and kind, and they always want what's best for the students. What they hoped for. They thought that if there were any problems or unfairness in India, it wasn't because of the British people. They believed it was because of some bad policies, or because the British people didn't know about the problems in India. Example, if something unfair happens in class, you think maybe the teacher doesn't know about it, or maybe another teacher made a bad rule, but your main teacher is still good. What they planned to do. Their belief. The Congress leaders believed that if they could tell the British Parliament, like the British government, about India's problems, the British people would listen and fix these problems. Example, if you believe that telling your teacher about your problems will make them understand and help you because you trust they are fair. Their plan. The Congress wanted to explain India's problems in a clear and respectful way. They thought that by asking nicely, their problems would be solved. Example, If you write a polite letter to the teacher explaining what's wrong in class, you hope the teacher will fix it because they care. 3. Propaganda in England. Why they wanted to go to England. The Congress leaders believed they needed to educate the British people about India's problems. They thought if British people knew the truth, they would help. Example: if you believe that your teacher's friends, other teachers, don't know what's happening in your class, you might want to tell them about it so they can help too. What they did. The Congress set up a British committee in London, a group of people who work for the Congress in Britain. They also started a weekly newspaper called India, which talked about India's problems so British people could read and understand them. Example: it's like starting a student newspaper to explain the problems in your school so other teachers and parents can understand and help fix them. Matter 4. Dadabhai Naoroji's belief. Who he was. Dadabhai Naoroji was a very respected leader in the Congress. He was always telling the other leaders to trust in the British people's kindness. Example: think of him as the student leader who always believes the teacher will help if only the students ask nicely enough. What he said. He said that the British people really cared about India, and that if the Congress leaders spoke loud enough and long enough, the British would hear them and help. Example: it's like saying, if we keep explaining our problems to the teacher and don't give up, the teacher will definitely help us. 5. The London Session Plan. What they wanted to do. In 1890, the Congress decided to hold a big meeting in London in 1892 to tell British people directly about India's needs. Example: imagine the students plan a big meeting with the principal to talk about their problems and hope the principal will listen and solve them. What happened? But in 1891, there were elections in Britain, like when people vote for leaders. So the Congress had to cancel the plan. After that, they never held the meeting. Example: if you planned a meeting with the teacher, but then the teacher got busy with a big event and the meeting never happened after that. Additional information to simplify. What the Congress leaders believed. The Congress leaders, like Dadabhai Naoroji, were very hopeful that the British people would care about India if they just understood the problems. Why they were disappointed later. Over time, some leaders felt that the British weren't really listening. Some people in India began to feel that being polite and asking nicely wasn't working. These people started thinking that stronger action was needed to get freedom. In summary, Congress leaders thought the British people were fair and good. They believed that by explaining India's problems politely, the British would fix them. They set up groups in London and a newspaper to explain India's issues to the British people. They planned to hold a big meeting in London, but it never happened. Over time, some people in India felt that just asking nicely wasn't enough to get real change. Example in a nutshell. It's like believing your teacher and principal are fair. You write polite letters explaining problems in class, and you believe that if they just understood the problems, they would fix them. But later, some students begin to think the teacher isn't really listening, and they need to do more than just ask nicely. I hope this helps you understand everything better. Okay, I will explain this passage step by step in the simplest way, like teaching a young child. Here's what it means. 1. What the Congress was asking for. Not asking for complete freedom yet. During this time, the Congress wasn't asking for full freedom from British rule. Example, it's like the students in a school asking for a few changes in rules, but not asking to run the school themselves. Swaraj, self-government, was mentioned, but not a big demand yet. Lokmanya Tilak, a leader, talked about Swaraj, which means self-government, like ruling ourselves. But this idea didn't become very popular at that time, and Congress didn't officially demand it. Example, imagine one student talks about the idea of students running the school themselves, but not many students or teachers pay attention to it yet. 2. What Surendranath Banerjee said, who he was. Surendranath Banerjee was an important Congress leader who spoke at the Congress meeting in Pune. now called Pune, in 1895. Example. Think of him like a respected senior student who speaks at a big school meeting. What he said about representative institutions. He said that the Congress wasn't asking for full representation, like full democracy for everyone, but only for educated people who understood English ways of government to have a say. Example. It's like asking the teacher to allow only the older students who understand the rules better to help make decisions for the class, but not giving this power to younger students. 3. What Congress was asking for specifically. The Congress wanted some changes in the government, but not complete control. Examples of their demands. 1. More Indians in the legislative councils. They asked for more Indians to be allowed to be part of the councils that helped make laws, and for these councils to have more power. 2. More Indians in top positions. They wanted more Indians in high positions, like in the Secretary of State's Council, the group that managed India's affairs in Britain, and in the councils of the Viceroy, the top British ruler in India. 3. Jobs for Indians in the civil service. They asked for more Indians to get jobs in the civil service, the people who help run the government. 4. Exams in both India and England. They wanted the exams for government jobs to be held in India too, not just in England, so more Indians could take part. 5. More rights for the people. They asked for the basic rights of people, like freedom of speech and freedom to protest, to be expanded. 6. Reduce military spending. They asked for less money to be spent on the British Army in India and more on things like education and development. 7. Separate the judiciary from the executive. They wanted judges, the judiciary, and government administrators, the executive, to be separate, so judges could make fair decisions without pressure from the government. 8. Improve India's economy. They asked for the government to investigate why India's economy and industry were so backward and how to improve them. 9. Help Indians abroad. They asked for better treatment of Indians living in South Africa and other parts of the British Empire. Example. It's like the students asking for better classroom rules, more say in how the class is run, and more chances for older students to help the teacher, but they're not asking to take over the whole school yet. 4. How the Congress asked. Congress asked. Polite and respectful language. The Congress always asked for these things in very polite, almost apologetic language, like they were saying please very softly. Example. It's like if the students asked the teacher, please, if you don't mind, could we kindly have more say in how the class is run? They used constitutional methods. The Congress leaders were committed to following the law and rules when they asked for changes. They didn't believe in breaking the law or using violence. Example. It's like the students always following the school rules when asking for changes instead of protesting or causing trouble in the classroom. Additional information to simplify. Congress was still respectful to British rule. At this time, the Congress was not ready to fully challenge British rule or ask for full independence. They just wanted some changes to make things better for Indians, but they were still very respectful to the British. Why things changed later. Later on, leaders like Lokmanya Tilak and others started pushing harder for Swaraj, or full self-government. As time went on, many Indians began to feel that politely asking for changes wasn't enough, and they wanted to fight for complete freedom. In summary, Congress wasn't asking for full freedom yet, just a few changes. They asked for more power for educated Indians, not for everyone. They wanted more Indians in government, more rights, and better treatment for Indians abroad. They asked very politely and followed all the legal rules. Later, some leaders like Tilak began to ask for much more, like full self-government. Example in a nutshell. It's like the older students in a school asking the teacher for more say in classroom rules and for better treatment, but they're still being very polite and not asking to run the school themselves. Over time, some students start thinking that just asking politely isn't working, and they start asking for bigger changes. I hope this makes it clear and simple for you. The government's attitude towards Congress. At first, the government acted neutral. When the Indian National Congress started, the British government pretended to be neutral. meaning they didn't openly support or oppose the Congress. Example: imagine two kids in class discussing their ideas, and the teacher just listens without saying much, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with them. Lord Dufferin hosted a garden party, but with a trick. In 1886, Lord Dufferin, who was a high British official in India, invited the Congress leaders to a garden party. But he made it clear that he didn't invite them because they were part of the Congress. He said they were just important visitors in the capital, Calcutta. Example: it's like a teacher throwing a party for a few students, but saying, "I'm not inviting you because you're discussing school rules, but just because you're in class today." In 1887, Congress got support in Madras. The governor of Madras, another British official, gave some help to the Congress for their meeting in 1887. Example: imagine the principal giving some supplies to students to hold a meeting, but not really saying whether he likes what they are discussing. Number 2. The government became hostile after 1887. Congress pamphlets upset the government. After 1887, the government became openly against the Congress. Why? Because Congress started publishing pamphlets, small booklets, criticizing the British government, saying it was cruel and that the landlords who worked for them were unfair. Example: if students wrote a pamphlet saying the teachers and school rules were unfair, and this upset the teachers. Pamphlet names. Some of these pamphlets had names like a Tamil Congress Catechism. This explained Congress ideas like in a question-answer style. A conversation between Mulvi Faruquddin and one Ram Buksh of Kambaktpur. This talked about two people discussing how the British were unfair. Example: these are like little booklets explaining the school rules are unfair and why students deserve better treatment. Up 3. The government encouraged people to oppose Congress. Officials helped start groups against Congress. The British officials didn't just stay neutral anymore. They encouraged people who supported the British to speak against the Congress. Two people they helped were Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, a respected leader, Raja Sheo Prasad of Benares. These men started the United Indian Patriotic Association. This group was created to fight against what Congress was saying. Example: it's like the teacher asking some students who like the school rules to form a group and argue against the students who are asking for changes. 4. Lord Dufferin criticized Congress. Lord Dufferin said Congress was very small. Lord Dufferin said Congress didn't represent all of India. He called it a group representing only a microscopic minority, meaning just a tiny part of the Indian population. He also said that the demands of the Congress were like a big jump into the unknown, meaning they were asking for big changes without knowing what would happen. Example: it's like a teacher saying, only a few students want these changes, and they don't even know what will happen if we follow their ideas. Number 5. Restrictions on government employees. In 1890, government workers were banned from Congress. The British government made a rule in 1890 that anyone working for the government, like teachers, police, or other officials, was not allowed to participate in Congress meetings or discussions. Example: it's like the principal telling all the teachers they cannot join the student meetings about school rules, or even attend them. Number 6. Lord Curzon wanted Congress to fail. Lord Curzon believed Congress would fall. Another British official, Lord Curzon, openly said that he thought Congress was weak and would soon collapse, fall apart. He even said one of his biggest goals was to help Congress die peacefully. Example: it's like a teacher saying, I think the student group asking for changes is going to break up soon, and I want to make sure it does. Additional information to simplify. In the beginning, Congress was moderate. Congress wasn't asking for extreme changes at first. They were loyal to the British and just wanted small reforms. But as they began criticizing the British government more, the government started to view them as a threat. The government didn't want Congress to grow. The British were worried that if Congress grew too powerful, they would lose control. So they tried to limit its influence by turning people against it, especially important leaders like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, and by making sure government workers couldn't participate. Summary. At first, the British government acted neutral towards Congress, pretending not to care. The government became angry when Congress started criticizing their rule through pamphlets. The British encouraged leaders to create groups against Congress, like the United Indian Patriotic Association. Lord Dufferin said Congress only represented a tiny group of Indians, not the whole country. In 1890, government workers were banned from joining Congress. Lord Curzon wanted Congress to fail and hoped it would die out soon. Assessment of the policies of the moderates, 1885 to 1905. The moderates were a group of early Indian leaders who believed in asking the British government nicely for changes in how India was ruled. This period, from 1885 to 1905, is called the Moderate Era. However, the leaders who came after them, called the extremists or radicals, thought the moderates were not doing enough. Let's break it down step by step in the simplest way. 1. What did the moderates believe? The moderates thought the British rulers were not all bad. They believed India wasn't yet ready to be a fully independent nation because it lacked some important things that make a country strong. The moderates believed that British rule was helping keep India together, and without it, India might struggle. Imagine you have a class that's always fighting and not working well together. Then, a strict but fair teacher comes and keeps things in order. The students may not always like the teacher, but they believe without the teacher, the class would become chaotic. Similarly, the moderates believed that India needed British rule to stay together. Why were the moderates loyal to the British Crown? Loyalty to the Crown means the moderates supported British rule. They believed being loyal to the British was the best way to get small improvements for India. They thought asking politely was better than fighting or protesting. Example: imagine if you want a new playground at school. One group of students, the moderates, thinks the best way to get it is by asking the principal nicely and patiently waiting for a response. They don't want to cause any trouble or seem ungrateful for what they already have. 3. What did B.C. Pal say? B.C. Pal, one of the moderates, said, "I am loyal to the British government because with me, loyalty to the British government is the same as being loyal to my own people and my own country." He meant that he believed supporting British rule was good for India because he thought the British would help India grow. Example: it's like a student saying, "I support the teacher's rules because I think they are helping make our class better, and I want the best for my classmates." Nasha Shofor. Why did the extremists criticize the moderates? The radical or extremist leaders who came after 1905 didn't agree with the moderates. They called the moderates' actions political mendicancy, which means they thought the moderates were begging for change instead of demanding it. Example: the extremists saw it like this. If you keep asking the principal nicely for a new playground but never get it, at some point, you have to stop asking politely and start demanding what you deserve. Lala Lajpat Rai, an important extremist leader, said the moderate leaders were giving too many chances to the British and not being brave enough to fight for real change. He even said it allowed some people to pretend to be patriots while benefiting from British rule. Example: imagine someone pretending to be your friend because they get extra privileges from the teacher. Lala Lajpat Rai thought some moderates were doing this with the British government, acting like patriots, but only getting benefits for themselves. 5. What was the big charge against the moderates? The extremists accused the moderates of being too loyal to the British. They felt that the moderates weren't thinking about full independence and were too comfortable with British control. Example: it's like some students wanting a completely new teacher because they believe they can run the class better, but the moderates are fine with the current teacher and just want small changes, like more free time or better materials. 6. Why didn't the moderates want British rule to end? The moderates didn't believe India was ready for self-rule. They thought that if the British left suddenly, it might be bad for India because India wasn't united or strong enough yet. Example: think of it like this. If the strict teacher leaves a class that's always fighting, the students might argue even more, and things could get worse without any rules. Summary of the Moderate Era, 1885 to 1905. The moderates asked the British government for small changes instead of demanding big reforms. They thought British rule was good for keeping India together, and they didn't see an alternative. Extremist leaders like Lala Lajpat Rai criticized the moderates, saying they were too soft and loyal to the British. The moderates believed loyalty to the British was the best way to protect India's interests. Additional simplification. The moderates were like polite students who believed in asking the teacher nicely for change. The extremists were like students who wanted big changes right away and thought the polite way was too slow and weak. The moderates were loyal to the British because they thought the British were helping keep things under control in India.